Good evening, and welcome to the third Common Action Forum. 2 years ago, at our inaugural event, we joined together in a discussion entitled The Steps of Progress in Times of Crisis, which enabled us to explore the foundations, objectives, missions of our young foundation. The following year, 2016, we explored the theme, the rise of global fear. Why is the world becoming less tolerant and more radical? It was the eve of the US elections. Nationalists argued bluntly for expansion. Islamophobia was more accepted than ever in Western public opinion. And refugee crisis continued without any satisfactory solution. Today, we begin another conference to discuss the limits to inequality. It is an opportunity to formulate an understanding that overcomes rancorous narratives claiming utopic equality and cynicism that attempts to justify injustice. Nowadays, there is not much room to grow. Mars still seems too far away, and on our planet, walls are trying to maintain exteriorities that no longer exist. And if we talk about human beings, the interior, biological, and psychological borders are vanishing in the same speed. Huge expansions, retractions, and voids, which, if not filled, might soon explode. But despite any pessimistic diagnosis, we have no other choice than to take positive action in light of our contemporary and proposed alternatives. Since we are definitely living on the same boat, we need to examine our limits to inequality. So for this opening session, we will have a thought-provoking conversation. Khanfar is president of the Common Action Forum and was Director General of Jazzera for 8 years, transforming the network into a global reference. He will converse with Antonio Escohotado, one of the most renowned Spanish intellectuals that no one can claim indifference to, and who has recently finished his great trilogy, The Enemies of Commerce. Arlene Clemcha, professor at the University of São Paulo, Brazil, as well as TV commentator, will moderate this session. The conversation will be 60 minutes long and followed by 30 minutes of exchange with the public. I give you the floor. Thank you very much.
Okay, so my role here will just be to facilitate, and that's what I hope to do, because we have two really, as Rafa has said, thought-provoking people here, and the idea is to give each approximately 10 minutes to speak, after which we can start a conversation through a few questions, possibly, and after 60 minutes conversation between both, we'll open the floor to questions from the public. At this moment, we will have two people with microphones to allow you to make your questions, and we'll ask you to be brief. We will, for obvious reasons, we only have 30 minutes, and we'll take 3 questions at a time. So, without any more delay, let's go on to our initial speeches, starting with Mr. Antonio Escohotado.
Please. Okay. Well, it's a great honor, pleasure to try to answer, in first place, the question of the limits of inequality. I've been working for about 17 years, all my time, all my free time, besides playing chess online, to the matter of what happened when instead of having equality with relationship to the law, we have this desire of having material equality. Of course, material equality is not exactly fitting to the differences that we have, not only between sexes, persons, but even inside the same family. We used to see families with 4 or 5 brothers. One of them is an entrepreneur and who develops industry and welfare. Another one is maybe an alcoholic. Another one is trying to use his brothers as a hanging perch for his needs. And the fourth one is maybe dead soon before getting into trouble. What is the limits to equality? Well, the limits to equality, in my opinion, are related to the fact that we normally believe that consciousness, an order saying you do this, you don't do this, is really moving the world. I think that the world is being moved by unconscious, anonymous, impersonal agent that, for example, Hegel called the objective Geist, objective spirit, that Adam Smith mentioned as an invisible hand, and Saint-Simon mentioned as the hand of avarice, the hand of the man who wants to have everything for himself. I think it's about time that we recognize that mankind depends a lot more on this inner and outer God that we can call the unconscious, that is pervading all the technological innovation, and that allows the world to grow, even though we need the politicians to go to sleep. I mean, we have to use the time they're sleeping to progress. This is not, I don't want to offend nobody, and there are great politicians, men of mind, men of independence, men who are capable to defy their, let's say, the interests of each party, like we've seen, Gladstone or Churchill, but it's not frequent. Normally the political parties, they work as a sort of a criba, I should say in Spanish, a sort of way of separating independent individuals from dependent individuals. That reminds me of a fragment of Heraclitus when he said that all the beasts that work in the field, they have to be led with a stick, even though they're being led to their feet, to their food. Also Heraclitus, in the same fragment, I don't remember the name, mentions that weak men, weak women, they prefer to be led than taking their own opinions and their own initiatives. I think that there's an immense treasury in the initiative, in the, let's say, we act instead of waiting for somebody else, or orders, or decisions from the outer world. I think we have enough reasons to believe in the absolute power of freedom and intelligence to govern the world if we don't try to be messianic, if we don't try to exclude others. I finish saying that economic problems, economic situation is based on multi-billion decisions made day by day by different individuals. If instead of these multi-billion decisions, you have 15, 17, 20 persons deciding on investment and consumption and credit, all that, you have a neurological collapse. I mean, it's like going from 20 billion cells acting in a moment to 15. This is medically a great problem. The person is about to die. Mm-hmm. Making this a sort of a chronicle situation is the common denominator of what's been happening in the 20th century as eugenicics, like making the new man, making humanity better. That has been a general genocide. I think it's enough for my first opinion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, yes. So please,
Thank you very much. And to continue the discussion on the inequality, maybe slavery was the most, ugly manifestation of inequality. The slavery that converts the human being into a commodity owned by those who can afford to own, and then deal with the human being, of course, and deprive him from all forms of freedoms. Of course, all of us know that slavery has been delegalized, and a lot has happened during the last few centuries in order to create a concept of equality and the humanism, which is something amazing that happened to us in the last 300 years and so. However, I can't really stop but thinking of the following. Did we really end slavery, or did we try to reintroduce it in a new shape and form, much more cosmetically possible and acceptable and legalized sometimes? And therefore, yes, if you speak about economics in particular and the ownership of wealth and properties, we might argue that still, of course, there is a huge gap, but we succeeded in converting humans again into a form of production tool, depriving them from what they're supposed to be, which is independent entities pursuing some form of meaning and existence. Now, in my part of the world where I have come from, I cannot stop but, of course, sometimes feel angry about how unequal and how, the gap that has been created between those in the north and those in the south has been normalized, Just a few days ago, a car exploded, of course, in Mogadishu. You have heard that. 600 people were victims of that kind of explosion. The coverage of main Western media did not go beyond just occasional reports and a little bit of analysis here and there. While, for example, when in Manhattan something happens, of course, things go 2 days, 3 days of continuous coverage and breaking news and analysis. This is, to say the least, this is from the realm where I have come from, media. I have witnessed that everywhere. I have witnessed it in every area of a human activity, not only in media. In politics, it is the same. In politics, the concept of democracy that has been, the Bible of the Western civilization, of the people of the North, has actually not been accepted to be implemented in the Arab world through the Arab Spring. And we have seen the silence of Western civilization, of Western governments, of course, when the Arab Spring was murdered and democracy was pushed aside, and no one since then has bothered to actually repeat the word democracy. I have not, by the way, heard a politician in the West that has been for the last 3, 4 years at least, mentioning anything about why don't we give these people some freedom, because it seems normal that we shouldn't have the freedom and others must enjoy the freedom. If that is not inequality, then what equality should be? Then you go into another field, where, our countries on foreign policies, of course, I understand that the system, since West Valley, is built on nation state. And then we have the concept of national interest. The concept of nation state and national interest, where most of our thinking about foreign policy is revolving around, has created this concept of also inequality by regarding the state and its interest the utmost religious goal, where the politician or even a journalist or even whoever would like to be patriotic to follow. And this is when we started disregarding the concept of a human belonging, the concept of the human rights of certain people under the banner that the interest of the state determine that. And this is why even the United Nations, I cannot stop but thinking of the following: to what extent the humanity is benefiting from an organization which we thought after the Second World War will create this universal peace, from actually doing this. I don't think that we are doing this, because to a large extent it is caught within this kind of parameters of national interest and nation states, and the agenda that it has been pursuing is limited by the necessities of these states in order to introduce to the public. I do believe that the humans at this moment in time are much more weaker than previous eras in history. I'm speaking about the humans, I'm speaking about ordinary people, and I think a lot of our power has been centralized in the hand of the states, which has become gigantic in its interference in our affairs, and in the hand of economics, corporations, and others. And I think there is a new mission for all of us to start thinking of ways to break away from that. Now, this is my basic understanding of what's happening in the realm of politics, media, and economics. However, the future is different. I see that the next few years, from 10 to 20 years, we are going to witness new challenges, and the humanity is standing on a new frontier. The new challenges are going to be related to our relationship with time and space, with geopolitics, with economics, the rise of networking, the rise of artificial intelligence, the rise of biotechnology. These are not just something similar to the first and second and third industrial revolutions. These are not something that, when we invented electricity, of course, everything changed. Our paradigm of thinking, our social order, and a lot has changed. But now, with this, if you would like to call it the fourth industrial revolution, there is something else happening, where we are reshaping the boundaries between a human being and the machine in a different way. We are timbering with well-established norms since the Homo sapiens left Africa until today. We know that there is something called memory. Now we might have something called artificial memory inserted in our brains. So there are new challenges that will reshape the way that we interact with each other. The concept of networking, for example, is going to reshape the idea of distribution of power in a tribe, in a family, in a state, in a company, wherever you go. The concept of networking will convert that pyramid structure, which we inherited generation after generation for the last few thousand years, into something might be different. And we need to figure out how to benefit from it or how to limit its danger. So, one thing I can tell you about the future, I am sure about it, that nothing we know about the future, or we at least figure out about the future right now, is similar to what we have learned. And if you follow the capital of today, if you capital with what Microsoft or Google or Amazon or the big corporations are actually doing and investing the billions of dollars, they are really investing the billions of dollars in that field, the field of artificial intelligence and biotechnology, and the field of nanotechnology and others, which might reshape our environment and our habitat. Now, that might be good news for some of us. because we might use this concept of networking to introduce much more equal societies. We might decentralize the concept of centralized hegemonic entity of the state or economics. While I am watching today the price of Bitcoin rising to 7,300 or 400 this afternoon, which is unbelievable for something that have just started a few years ago to really gain so much momentum. I don't know where it's heading, but the idea that the humans are capable of alternative economic model, not passing through banks, is something I really appreciate. Where it is heading, I'm not sure yet. I'm not an economist, but something amazing. We used networking amongst citizens to create an alternative economic model, and let us see where it's going. So I am sure that there is something positive happening, but also there is something terrible is going to happen. When that kind of superior human is created, where he is going to have super genes and super memory and super capabilities of physical, powers, definitely we might end with something called superhumans and ordinary humans. And that might be another threshold of slavery, another way of looking down at other people. And then those who cannot afford this high-tech technology, they might suffer the consequences and the gap might go bigger. So the result of all of the above mentioned, what the message I'm going to tell you today is the following. The battle of the future is not going to be based on geopolitics only. It's not going to be based on race or religion or culture. There is a global and human struggle to define our humanism and to protect it, and to come up with a universal agenda that renews the debate and discussion towards a model which is ethically profound, which has virtue in it, but also at the same time could be rational and could be productive. Otherwise, we might face something that all of us, feel not comfortable with. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you. From what both of you were saying, and with several points in common, actually, something I'd like to ask goes back to one parallel with the moment or the period, the quite long period in history, 2 centuries, 3 centuries, which it took to not only create the nation state, but the idea that the nation state was desirable. It was a great degree of emancipation. That was how it was viewed in the past, up to the 19th century, when many nation states were still forming. People saw the nation state as actually a vehicle for equality. But it wasn't real equality, of course. It was a fictitious equality, the equality of vote. People would be equal in face of the state. They were not actually equal in terms of their wealth, of gender, and so on and so on.
But do you believe that equality in gender or equality in wealth is somewhat desirable? Do you think that to have the same number of shoes, of the same size of nose, is going to benefit mankind in any way? Is not electricity, for example, based on the difference of potential, on having poles opposite?
So what do you believe?
I think that the only equality we can have is the equality under the law. I mean that we all have the same duties and we all have the same rights. And it's a long time we've been suffering victimism in different shapes. Finally coming from that famous sermon in which a person says, the proteges, the beloved by God are the weak. We have to put first those who are last. This is a very difficult and violent operation, and it's against the laws of nature that by conscious or unconscious means inside the same family create persons who trust their fellow beings and decide to live a life, humble life, saying, well, I want the respect of my neighbor, that's enough. And the other ones that say, no, I want to lead mankind to some kind of emancipation, and we will do it by force if necessary. Of course, it is always necessary in those cases. And this equality, I think we don't need equality in the least. I should restrict it to equality of opportunities. But that is fulfilled in the families. When I was speaking about a brother like this and the other brother like that, that is so obvious. I don't have to lose any saliva in the matter. We don't have to be victimism. We have to believe that spirit, that soul, that intelligence is way beyond us, each individual person. We can believe that God, in that sense, God is the reality of things and the positive side of the world. And that has always been there, and it will always be there. We can forget about it, saying that, no, I received the revelation and I received it in a way that it's only mine. Well, these people are sort of analphabet and hate a lot other people and themselves. It's up to them to continue this sort of life. But with the internet, with the novelties now, what did the internet do? The internet finished distance. We don't have distance. We just don't have no distance. The only distance is the distance of the souls. Some people hate, some people love. Some people study, some people lose their time. That's all. I mean, you don't have to say, oh, I have to benefit those who are stupid. Oh, they have enough with their stupidity.
So the equal opportunities, I would take that. Okay, equality in opportunity and justice. As far as law is concerned.
How do you find justice?
Now, the most beautiful, I agree with you, but there is one important worry. Practically speaking, both the equality of opportunity and justice are defined in real time by entities, which we call states or powers, centers of power within our societies, those who also are interested in preserving their interest and maximizing their profit, and therefore
imagine they would not have interests.
Okay,
that would
but
be
this
horrible.
is the point. How would I guarantee a system that will produce, will be able and capable of sustaining this equality, rather than utilizing it, as we see in many countries right now, utilizing it for the maximization of their own, of the elite, of those who own, and pushing away those who can't? That's the question.
Well, then you have again the victim in sort of a resurrection of the victim. In my opinion, you said very truthfully that the covering of what happened in Mogadishu, this monstrous explosion that killed 600 people, is nothing. It's just a short thing in the news. But don't you think that the great problems of this part of the world that we say Islamic, I mean, that believes that this nationality is absurd. We have to have this general obedience to God. This Islamists mean this, if I'm not wrong. I mean, it's submission to the will of God. And it has a problem with the printing machine, in my opinion. Gutenberg invented the printing machine. But the printing machine implies that every language produces, and if I'm not wrong, Quran, saying that truth is always in Arabic. And if you don't have it in Arabic, it's not really truth. Just make it clear to me, because I don't have it clear. I hear that this is textual. I mean, this is literal. So you have to have the truth in Arabic. Otherwise, it's not the truth. Then you have a problem with the printing machine. And then the consequence of this is that it's a world like separated from the other world, even though we are totally the same. I mean, the men, the women, the children, the elder people, they are totally the same. But a part believes that the truth is concentrated in their culture and in their language. So there's no nationalities, there are no particularities, there's no, let's say, municipalities, nothing besides the will of God. And of course, there are many gods, and there are people who are atheists, my friend. I'm not an atheist, by the way, but you have to face this. You have to face competition. I think the great problem of at least 2/3 of the world, that they're not adapted to competition. I mean, they are adapted to the tribes, the herds, this situation of the primitive man, let's say 100,000 years ago, in which, of course, there was no private property. Of course, everybody has a solidarity, full solidarity, but this didn't produce wealth. This didn't produce the internet and all the previous things.
Okay. Now, of course, I mean, I don't know where did you get this Arabic truth in the Quran, because I personally, the first time I hear this, I mean, the Muslims in the world, I think 1.5 billion, only 250,000 are Arabs.
Proportion.
But the rest are not Arabs, and they read the Quran in Spanish and German in hundreds of languages, and they communicate with the truth that's supposed to exist in the Quran. So the fact is, I don't think that there is a monopoly of Arabic language over Quran. This didn't come to my mind at all. I've never heard of this. The second important element, in fact, this kind of minimizing the Islamic world into kind of Muslims who are abiding to certain kind of phrases in the Quran or the concept of submitting to God, just like that, is a little bit, complicated. And that what led the Islamic world and the Western civilization to clash into many levels. I've never thought of this as a religious, actually, clash between the two entities. Because if you go through history, it has never happened like that. We had interests like other nations, Muslims and the Europeans fought in the Crusaders, and then we have colonialism. It's something like any other nation in the world. And Islam in this concept, when it comes to politics and economics, was never actually an obstacle of developing alternatives in every form. And always I argue that enlightenment started in the Islamic world, not in Europe, long time before the Europeans. But the issue is not about religion. I think the issue, frankly speaking, and this is what I think, that the Western civilization with time developed very strong center of gravity when it comes to intellectualism, to self-interest, and also to see the world from one point of view. And everyone was a victim of that, including the Muslim world, including Asia, including more than us, maybe Africa. When I think that goes back to a perception that was created that once you are in the North, once you are in Europe, you have the authority, the moral authority, even the religious authority. And going back to religion, I don't want, of course, to say how that was justified in a Christian terminology. When we invaded Africa, we enslaved the people, we regarded Latin Americans different, and we regarded the indigenous people in Australia or in Canada not even humans. So that religion also was used to justify kind of things, although, as again, I agree that the issue is not the religion. The issue is a selfish human being trying to maximize his dominance. And that, for the last 300-400 years, the humanity has suffered from this concept of a central, vision that was created to dominate. I am arguing that the future should be of diversity.
Sure.
I think civilizations, including the Muslim or the African or the Asian or the Latin Americans, we have very rich heritage and culture, that if we tap into it and we get this kind of a humanistic nature that exists everywhere, I think the humanity will be much more safe. We don't need to witness 600 people killed in Mogadishu, and we don't want to see, Iraq invaded by the Americans. But the concept itself needs to be developed. And the intellectuals in the West, and of course in the rest of the world, but I regard the West in particular, and I insist on it, not because I am racist, or I think that the Western people are different. I think most of us sitting in this room share the same ideas. And this is why we gather for Common Action Forum, because we do believe that this concept of diversity and the concept of legitimacy as well, of various thoughts and ideas and techniques, could reshape our perspective of centralization of power that has been, for the last 2-3 centuries, creating major inequality and major, let us forget the word inequality, major injustice, major marginalization, confiscation of territories. Our buildings, most of them have been built because we have enslaved the public. We have enslaved hundreds of millions of people, and we built civilization. That was history, I agree, but we don't want to be stuck in it. But we need to admit that we were not just. And the result of today, when we bring justice to everyone else, we don't take the Western advice in the Islamic world very serious, or in Africa or in Asia, because still we could see the consequences of that concept of discrimination against these kind of civilizations, and we need to rehabilitate that and to fix that kind of injustice in order to resume our I don't know, march for justice.
Implicit.
Well,
Excuse me, implicit in your aversion to the idea of defending equality, of course, is totalitarianism, right?
Yeah.
And in your speeches about, you spoke about the problem of following, of simply following given ideas, of not having a critical thought, of not being capable of, okay, how can society, the question would be, given what both of you had said, putting them converging, how can society start not being led, but to lead, at the same time preventing the pitfalls of social media, which, I mean, basically, to put it, would be the threat of banalization. We can even think of Hannah Arendt's banalization of evil, which is, the incapacity to think, and to just follow what the masses are saying, being it through the nation state, being it through counter, forces such as social media.
You just mentioned Hannah Arendt, but she did not have the notion of complexity. She was the princess of the female thought in the middle of the 20th century. I admire her very much. But she was not aware of what we can call the paradigm of complexity that before I was mentioning as objective Geist in Hegel's philosophy, or like the presence of the impersonal, anonymous, unconscious factor that really creates, for example, the development of technique. Let's be clear about Islam. It was the world's leading power in progress, in openness for the world. From the 8th century to the 14th century, when Ibn Khaldun published this fantastic prolegomena and developed the notion of asabiyya, which means cohesion, and he understood universal history on the scheme that a group of few people became very unified and took over the world and created, let's say, the Roman civilization, the Arabic civilization, the Greek civilization, asabiyya. It was a sort of eternal cycle in which either you get united or you get uncoordinated, and then, like life, you die because of that, because the cells don't work. Well, what is the difference between the paradigm of complexity and the previous paradigm? Well, you use or you don't use the totality of your neurons. When I was speaking about a society like ours, where billions of actions are being decided every moment by everybody, and when we think about a society, let's say, that happens in the whole world, but not in the Western civilization, then of course we realize that we're not using the total brain capacity. So the problem of prosperity, that you see that in the Netherlands, people are prosperous, even though it is a horrible climate. There's nothing there that should allow a person coming from Ghana or Nigeria to maintain their life. It's only here. It's know-how. So the development of know-how is directly connected with the freedom you give to the neurons to work. And how do you give freedom to the neurons? Well, you don't have dogma. If you have dogma, the neurons are going to collapse, like the brain or like the heart in a fit. So I think that what the world has learned is to say that its own interest is not against the interest of the rest. That the best interest of the whole is respecting your neighbor and understanding that nobody will ask your action unless you're a master in the field that you've decided to devote yourself to. I mean, the opposite to victimism is say, man, believe in yourself, work on yourself, look for yourself. Know that God is inside you, not outside you. Look for it. Look for the God inside. And that means working in a thing that your neighbor considers useful. Don't think that you will get nothing else besides the respect of your fellow beings.
Last, I think, like 4 or 5 weeks ago, I was in Canada, and I attended the ceremony of the new Canadian citizens. So the Chief Justice came and delivered a fantastic speech to the new citizens who have been granted the certificate of citizenship that day. And she, actually, the Chief Justice, when she spoke to them, she said, now Canada is in need for you. And Canada should be, you should pay back to Canada in a form of political participation. Each one of you should go out, become part of the politics. You must run for elections. You must join municipality. You must go to the parliament. That's your duty towards the country. At lunch, she was sitting next to me, and I said to her, exactly, this is the same advice we give to the people in our countries, because we tell them, if you want to go to jail, please go to politics, So what you are saying is, I wonder where that access to our neurons could exist, if most of our political systems outside certain countries or economic system is in a way or another pushing you into certain kind of order. I think our fight is not about religions and about whether God is inside or outside. Definitely there is a beautiful debate to have. But I think there is structural injustice in the current international economic and political systems. Most of our governments are actually pushing people not to use their neurons. And if they do, most likely, like what's happening in Egypt right now or in many other countries in the Arab world or the rest of the world, not only, they end in jail. So our fight is for freedom, definitely. Our fight is for equal opportunity. Our fight to liberate the human being to make his own choice and to continue. If someone decides to deal with God as someone outside or inside, I would argue that this is his personal affair. I'm not going to force him to do this or that, but at least let us agree in the principle that we have the choice to continue our pursuit of the truth or our pursuit of, if you like to call it, justice, in a sound foundations. This is important. And the last remark, and I want to refer to the concept of social media, since it is something that I'm very connected to. And I do believe that we have a great opportunity of definitely transcending the concept of space into another frontier. So when we formed this concept of Common Action Forum, for example, I think a lot of us communicated through internet. And right now, a lot of our forums and meetings happen because we are capable of sitting together and deciding on matters that we share. And this is important because it redefines nationalism as well. So in my team, right now where I run a lot of NGOs and so on, I don't think I need to see them physically, beside the fact that I can communicate from South Africa to Latin America to Russia through internet. And that space is redefining the concept of the tribe I came from. My tribe consisted of a chief and many other people around him. They go every day to the council and sit together and decide on matters related to their tribe. The tribe today exists everywhere in the world. We communicate and we decide, we vote, we agree on certain values. So definitely there is a new social structure emerging through networking and through media. Social media might be a disturbance for now, but this is for short. With time, people will learn where to pick up the right information and to capitalize on it. But networking is much more larger and positive trend that maybe it will really save us from a lot of discrimination that happened during the last few centuries.
That's right, I believe so. But I mentioned Ibn Khaldun in 14th century and the Asabiya, because in my opinion, the basic problem of Islam is that it believes that still in the 14th century. What happened since Ibn Khaldun published his monumental Prolegomena? Well, it didn't happen nothing.
Okay, now, I am, of course, a student of Ibn Khaldun. I personally respect his thoughts and ideas. Someone was the founder of what we call social sciences at that time. And definitely, when he spoke about the concept of Asabiyya, which in my opinion, one of the few other concepts that he spoke about in his great volume called the Introduction, the Muqaddimah, when he spoke about the concept of Asabiyya, he was analyzing what is in front of him. Like also, the philosophers of Enlightenment, when they spoke the divine right of the kings in Europe. Yeah. When you now mention it, it looks bizarre. It looks to us like, what the hell is happening? But now, Ibn Khaldun, 6-7 centuries before that, he referred to his reality. He described the political structure of his time, and he analyzed what's happening around him, and he found the concept of Asabiyya, the appropriate description of reality, not the ideal that the humanity should remove to. Because while Ibn Khaldun, by the way, was doing that kind of concept, he was also defending another concept where humans, regardless of their race and religion and whatever it is, they could be part of something else. He himself was a manifestation, was a minister in the court in this part of the world, later on in Cairo. But before that, he started, of course, in Morocco. And I think, in my opinion, the concept of Islamic State between two brackets, also now the concept of Islamic State is associated with ISIS. But just to go back to Ibn Khaldun time, which is like 1,000, I don't know how, 800 years ago. Nearly. Now, Ibn Khaldun, when he described the state, it was very clear that his state is not our modern state. His state was only in charge of protecting the borders and keeping the safety of the public, while our state is interfering in every essence. The judiciary in Ibn Khaldun ideas and thoughts and the state was not owned by the state itself. It was owned by the public, because the justice system and the judges are nominated by the public to rule.
The ulama.
The judiciary itself, or the laws are produced by people who do not take salaries from the state. People who are produced by the society itself. So I would look at his state as maybe third of the power of the current state that we have. And his state is much more friendly to the humans because it does not have that kind of intervention in every single aspect of people's life. So if you want to speak about Ibn Khaldun, what a nice man he was.
It's really not a welfare state, not in the least.
Actually, in the concept of Ibn Khaldun, the state, part of what it used to do, and that is a tradition within the Islamic State from the time of the second Caliph of Islam, Umar, is that every person born in the state is entitled to minimum income that sustain his life, regardless of his father and mother. That was the rule. And that continued to be the case for generations.
I didn't
until,
know
of course,
that. I
of
didn't
course,
know that.
That was, of course, yesterday we were discussing the concept of inequality, the concept of basic income. That was enshrined within the concept of the Islamic State from the 10 years after the death of Prophet Muhammad until generations of the what we call the Islamic Empire later on.
So maybe you don't need actually the defense of any equality to defend the idea of a certain limit to inequality.
Oh, we agree.
Yeah.
Could you develop a bit more?
I agree totally. But you see, for example, now in Spain, which has not been the wealthiest country in the world, but now you see when you come up to this building, you look around, you see the floors of the buildings, you look at the floor, and you say, what a difference if I was in Bangkok, or if I was simply in Montevideo, which is a very civilized country in Latin America. I would not mention Bolivia, for example. What happens here? It's a sort of a polishing, unconscious polishing of things that make them all the time better without anybody taking care of that. It's something like an investment, like an unconscious investment that in the other parts of the world doesn't happen. We have to have this other part of the world to incorporate themselves to this, we say in Spanish, amortización. It means that you have to take into account that things get used and old, and you have to pay, you have to save some part of the present to make things at least as they were. And if you can polish them, like it happens in the Castellana, where we are now. I remember this place when I was 15. I'm nearly 80. It has changed a lot, even though the buildings are the same. Now we have solid foundations. And it's not because nobody said this or that. In my opinion, it's because we left the neurons to work on themselves. We didn't produce collapses of the heart or of the brain, trying to make things better, being stupid human individuals that cannot contain the immense knowledge that things have in themselves.
Okay. Now, of course, just something came to my mind while we're speaking about the 14th century dogma, which you referred to. There are two major people who influence a lot of us in the Islamic world. And it happened that they influenced a lot in the Western civilization. One of them is called Ibn Rushd, who was born just next door here in Cordoba. And his name is Averroes in English. And he was actually the one who introduced the concept of rational thinking to the rest of Europe. And his students from the royal courts of Europe came back in order to reintroduce enlightenment. And the second one is Ibn Arabi. He was also born in Murcia, by the way, which is next door as well.
Greatest poet.
And Ibn Arabi as well, he introduced another tradition of spirituality and the concept of humanism, where all humans, regardless of their religion, this is his famous poetry, that, since they are created by one God, so they are equal in every form and sense. These two major traditions were the final culmination of what we call the Islamic tradition and civilization. A rational and a spiritual. Both of them existed, and both of them, by the way, flourished in Andalusia during that period. Now, what happened after that, to an extent that right now we can kill 600 people in one explosion in Madrid, in Somalia, and that is just a normal thing that happens, of course, in Syria and Iraq and everywhere in the Arab world. Yes, definitely there is a problem in the Islamic world, I acknowledge that. But of course, there's a deep political issue and geopolitical issues that happened. I mean, 300-400 years of strife and struggle and confrontation that also led to paralyzing the natural growth of the Islamic mind into, what in the West was called later on Renaissance and modernity, and in the Islamic world, we found ourselves face to face with this concept that we could not accommodate. But I can't, for a moment, defend what also the West has done to us in the form of colonialism, in a form of discrimination, in a form of slavery, that led to a huge battle for existence, not even development. I think we were busy trying just to exist, try to survive, try to live, rather than to develop a new paradigm of thinking. So there are reasons for that. And Islam per se itself was never a force of freezing the progress towards rationalism or towards spirituality, but it was, in fact, a power behind it. It was interrupted by what could, to any society, create paralysis, which is discrimination, which is foreign occupation, and which is also colonialism. So, to look at it from where I have come from, I don't see it a dogmatic issue. I see it a political and a clash that actually happened, and we were the losing party of it, and we found ourselves trying to defend rather than to build upon and to flourish.
You're much more informed about this thing than I am, so I do not enter into the question. I could ask you, for example, if Buddhism has developed a sort of a problem with the world outside, as Islamism has developed a problem, obvious problem.
Buddhism?
Buddhism or Taoism or Hinduism, all the other religions, I don't think they isolate the people. And for sure, not more than 1,000 million like we have in Islam. I was 1 year in Thailand recently, sabbatical year, and I saw that the only social problem that existed in Thailand was the Muslim minority. It was in the south part of the country. I don't think it is objective to believe that colonialism affected more Islam than Buddhism, or affected Taoism, or other religions of animism, for example, all over the world. I think Islam isolated itself of the world, believing in dogma. What is to believe in dogma? It means that you believe more in what you hear than in what you see. Heraclitus, Fragment 81, if I'm not wrong, said these people that kind of trust more what they get through the ear than what they get through the senses, these people are sleeping, he said. I think Islam has been in a deep slumber from the fantastic epoch of Averroes. I'm Aristotelic. I've been studying Averroes' interpretation of Aristotle as the nearly the absolute truth. So, and Ibn Arabi, I have enjoyed very much his poetry too. But then I say, what has happened since the 14th century? I think it's intolerance and dogma, basically. But I might be wrong. You know much better than I do about the facts. The only problem is that right now we're reaching limits of touching the, let's say, sensibility of people. When we hear about thousands of people deciding to kill others just because of that, we haven't seen that for a long time. We had that for the first time in the Jewish zealots. These are the origin of the fanatic. Fanatic means people that come from the fun, the temple. And we have these kind of people. But now the world is bewildered, it's astonished, is horrified. And I'm very much afraid of a reaction, an irrational reaction, in which you say, in Spanish, paguen justos por pecadores. That means I don't mind. I mean, I will kill 100 if I can kill a single individual of this land. We cannot tolerate this to our societies. It will blame us, it will cover us with horror. But the tension doesn't come from these societies. I mean, Buddhism is not being attacked by Western civilization. Islam is.
Okay, because you have not been in Baghdad when 1 million people were killed.
Yeah,
you have seen in Madrid
horrible.
an explosion where tens of people sadly were also murdered by a Muslim crazy suicide bomber. I have seen the 1 million people slaughtered.
No.
But that was projected on TVs as just a legitimate action of war. I saw it as a crime that really made me extremely angry. I was in Afghanistan when I was counting bodies of humans, children, men and women. I remember phoning the American base to inquire about an attack against a wedding, and they refused to admit that it was a wedding, while I was seeing in front of me the woman in wedding dress killed with all the wedding party. What I'm saying to say, would I, at that moment, say, this is the Christian civilization, the Western civilization, damn this civilization that has created this kind of destruction? If it is a matter of how much destruction has been done to properties and to human life, I would argue that Muslims really, if they become crazy, that might be something from a neuron point of view could be understood. Although I am, by the way, condemned by all form of groups in the Middle East. But the issue is, I would say, there is a bias of understanding reality, and this bias is tilting towards the West. And this is what filters to people's mind. So when a crazy guy goes and kills and does, that becomes a major issue, which is definitely a major issue. I don't argue against that. But when we are in that part of the world witnessing, decade after another, not just in the last few years, decade after another, thousands and hundreds of thousands of people murdered just because a certain country decided to invade or to fight or to punish or to change the regime, that is not represented on media or not represented amongst intelligentsia as it's supposed to be. And then we are blamed for other things that is happening in a way. Yes, terrorism is a phenomena that we suffered from more than the West.
Yeah, more
The
than
terrorism
nobody else.
of Islamic groups that have conducted this kind of terrorism in Turkey, more than what happened in London or Paris or wherever it is.
You
Or in
mentioned
Baghdad or
Mogadishu.
in Damascus. It's definitely
What just
evil.
happened in
But
Mogadishu.
also the terrorism of the machine of war against our land was huge. It doesn't make it right when it is conducted by a member in the United Nations or a member of the 5 permanent countries in the Security Council. It is also ugly, it is bad, it should be condemned. And this is what creates a lot of anger and frustration amongst the generation that's supposed to be searching for happiness, but they are now actually angry and searching for revenge. And that's not a healthy thing that we are facing. As I said to you, we are suffering from that more than anyone else.
You are, but for example, I should believe that the war of Iraq it's not only a ridiculous historical fact, but I should accept that it was provoked by some military contractors of the United States to get a little bit more money and funds. I could accept that thing. It's the most probable causal action, but this happens after the Twin Towers problem, and the Twin Towers happens after the Nairobi tremendous action. I was there in the moment. I mean, not in the area, but no. I think, my friend, you cannot blame colonialism or actions of violence of the West, even though there have been many, and probably will be many more. I think it's not this. I think it's a spirit, a national soul or an international soul that suddenly gets aside in the path of freedom, reality, and
how would you explain the uprisings called the Arab Spring then? Wouldn't it be also a totalitarian view to see only the dogma that
He
exists
knows
in
much
Islam?
better than me how to answer that question. I'm not informed about that. You should ask
When the Arab Spring happened, you know, I think the people who really fought in the streets of Cairo and Tunisia and Yemen and Libya were not actually dogmatic. I mean, we have seen Muslims, Christians, we have seen secularists, nationalists, Islamists, everyone together, you know, rallying for democracy and freedom. You know who let them down? The international powers, to a large extent. I remember delivering a speech in the European Union Council when, I mean, they invited someone to speak about the the Arab uprising after the elections in Egypt that brought Muslim Brotherhood to power. So, of course, I would say that most of the people there initially were celebrating the concept of Arab Spring. After the so-called elections and the rise of Islamists to power, it became a little bit crazy that they thought, okay, these people, democracy is bringing us the bad guys. So in the discussion about this particular point, I remember a representative of Spain, by the way, he asked the following question. He said, you know what, how do you expect us to support Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, who are suppressing women? I said, sorry, excuse me, repeat the question. He said, they are not dealing with women as supposed to be dealt with, and they don't have equality, although, of course, this is baseless, because, I mean, Muslim Brotherhood, they send to parliament more than any other party of women. No, but the issue, I said, do you really in this council define your relationship with countries in our part of the world based on their treatment of women? They said, of course, this is very important criteria. I said, please, could you tell me how is your relationship with Saudi Arabia at that time? Why are you lying? Okay, tell me the truth. Tell me that I don't want these kind of people because I think they contradict my national interest. Let us speak about it. Don't deceive me by giving me a moral speech about the rights of women when you are guilty of working with the most aggressive, most repressive regimes in the Middle East, and you're celebrating them, and you don't even utter a word for their rights. So this kind of double standards that created a lot of problems for us as well. So when you speak about the Arab Spring, yes, we have a lot of people inside our countries who stood for counter-revolutions. A lot of money was spent from rich countries against counter-revolutions, but also we have the silence and we have the betrayal, actually, of the international society, of those young people who are supposed to have transferred our societies from the dark moment that we are passing through into enlightenment of freedom and democracy. But we did not do it.
Oh, my friend, but do you really think Islam is not behaving with women in a sort of anachronic way?
At least my wife is happy, I don't know. You know, I mean, really, I don't want to go about women and Islam because this is a very old debate. Our countries, like every country in the world, we are going through major discussion.
What about the ablation?
The what?
Ablation of clitoris.
Sorry?
Ablation of clitoris.
It's not Islamic.
What about the ablation of the...
It's not Islamic.
It has nothing to do with Islam, by the way.
Nothing.
At all. It's condemned by all major Islamic scholars,
Oh, I'm glad.
generation after another. It is a tradition
glad.
of certain societies. It's out of a tradition. It has nothing to do with Islam. I really, myself, I've never known about this concept until I came to the West because a lot of people make it a big issue about Islam. But I know that, for example, I'm living from Palestine to Jordan to many countries in the Islamic world all my life. I've never come across a woman who did that.
Yeah?
It happened. There are tribes in certain territories, maybe in Sudan, maybe some, I don't know where, other countries, but it is a tribal culture. It's not Islamic. It has nothing to do with the Sharia. Neither I've never come across a woman in my environment, at least, that have gone through that.
I was wrong then, my friend. I'm sorry. I was simply wrong. About also, there's a problem with polygamy. I mean, Western laws, they have this issue on marriage. The institution of marriage
I think we implies
you have to divorce before you can have, let's say, 5 or 10 wives. And if you are the king of Saudi Arabia, maybe you have 100. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. If I was a young guy, I would love that kind of regime. I would strongly support it. But the problem is not that. The problem is that I hear once and again, for example, a young lady was working in my house as cleaning the house, and the fathers they will not allow her to go to the beach, for example, in a normal way. They will take incredible care about maintaining her virginity, which is the patrimony of the family, have to sell that in the right moment. This is anachronic, I think, in the world. I mean, I'm not objecting morally to this. I'm just saying that this thing is a kind of a habit that isolates certain persons from the others that are following a different path.
So you need to, in this logic, I mean, Africans who have their own traditional culture, Asians who have their own traditional culture, and Latinos who have their cultural tradition will be also excluded, because you are referring to certain standards or values as the universal standard that every human being in the world should adopt. Otherwise, he is isolating himself.
No, I don't say that.
I think it is not true. I mean,
no, I don't say
frankly
that.
speaking, I lived 12 years in
Well,
Africa, and I came across magnificent cultures of African tribes and traditions and societies, which I respect very well. I might not taste positively certain kind of practices, but I understand it. And this is the spirit as a journalist and as someone who have been traveling the world, that I have dealt with the world and understood it. I don't think there would be one standard where all of us should follow, and then we can say, you know, if the woman, they don't go to the beach in bikini, it means that we are not civilized. I mean, this is definitely a different
that, you
criteria.
sell the hymen of the woman, you sell the virginity.
Okay.
I mean, this is a patrimony we don't accept in Western worlds. But imagine we had, let's say, 50 million European emigrated to Africa. It would create a problem in Africa. They will probably be received with heavy machine guns in the beaches.
I'm really sorry to interrupt when it's starting to, you know.
Yeah.
It's starting to get the heat up.
We should, we should let the public participate in this debate now.
Okay.
We'll take 3 questions at a time, and then both of them will have like 4 or 5 minutes to answer. Please, 1 minute maximum for each question so that we can keep this in time. So I see 1 person here, 2 and 3. Those who have the mics, please. 1 person down here lifted her hand first. Could you say your name and the question, please?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Fernando Ron Martin. I'm a member of the board of CAF. Okay. My question is, forgetting, not seeking for, forgetting equality, is it enough just having equality under the law, as Mr. Escohotado says, which is a pretty nice liberal point of view, or do we need something more, like, for example, a basic income or some of the things that Mr. Khanfar arised?
Basic income.
Because if we take the second position, the state will have a very active role to play. Thank you.
Very well.
Okay. Over here. Who was it here? Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi. I think talking about inequality, clearly out of this discussion, I realized that there is also a historical inequality in understanding the world politics. First of all, there was a hint of celebrating nationalism. I mean, for us who come from Africa, nationalism has been a disaster because of flimsy drafting of borders which did not take into consideration the distribution of tribes, for example. Whilst nationalism might have been a great thing for the Europeans because it guaranteed rights and equality, for Africans it has been a disaster. People are separated, and as a result, the continuing wars that we see are as a result of that nationalism. So there is that inequality in understanding history and its implication from the Europeans. That's the first point. The second point is there is also inequality in terms of publication of academic and research on how the world political decisions which emanated from Europe affected the world. So we are discussing now based on the information or education which is Eurocentric. But some of us are exposed to different kind of information, which if translated will totally contradict everything that's been said at the moment. So there is that inequality, which I think perhaps the internet, as we continue or try to populate the internet with new information, should take that into consideration, that we need to ingest the new relevant information on the internet so that the history or future information to our kids and grandchildren can reflect the reality of the world. Because it is very clear that even this discussion, it is extremely Eurocentric. It's not taking consideration the reality of what's happening on the ground. For example, there's been this criticism of certain cultures and people having less neurons to apply, etc., etc. But we are not talking about the privilege which has been presented or not presented by the European colonizers, for example, in Africa. How do we achieve full potential if there's been a historical deprivation of us to use our neurons to the full capacity? That's not taken into consideration. The assumption is that all is equal, all was normal. No, it was not normal. There was a concerted effort of depriving and oppressing people. As a result, then the conclusion was those people who live in the global south are not capable of using the full capacity of their neurons because of their geographical trapping. And that has to change. So the point I'm trying to make is that we need to redress the historical inequality of information so that all of us can have access to the new information that will truly reflect the human history. Because right now it's too Eurocentric, and I don't think it reflects the true reality of humanity as it stands. Thank you.
Sir, I believe you gave us a lecture instead of asking us a question.
And the third question, please. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bilal. I come from the same part of the world where Waddah is coming from. I'm just wondering why Islam came at the discussion, Islam and the way Muslims. I think the pure form of inequality in what you said, Mr. Antonio, is that Muslims, you said Muslims, Islam, you're generalizing the whole Muslim population. Muslims, I don't know how much, they are in billions. Turks are Muslims, Indonesia are Muslims, Malaysians are Muslims. They're totally different. They have different culture, different traditions, different way of even practicing their Islam. So this is where the colonization or the Western perspective of things actually is a form of inequality. This is why I just want to comment. Thank you.
I didn't understand really what he said.
He was also commenting on what you said about Islam, about having one view of Islam.
Like a unified phenomenon.
Yes. Okay, so let's go to 4 or 5 minutes each, please.
Please.
Okay.
Well, apparently I have a unified conception of Islam. Well, if I don't have better information, I will keep on up to it because I have not received any other basis of data. I should remember you of Edward Said, who wrote a very famous book called Orientalism, if I'm not wrong, about 1976, complaining that the Eurocentrism, it's a way of answering also the other question, Eurocentrism is well diffused along the world, and it is, as any centrism, unfair and absurd. Yes. Is there in any other part of the world chairs devoted to archaeology, history, philology, understanding and maintaining languages that have disappeared, besides the Western world? Has the notion of Eurocentrism or Roman centrism or Islamocentrism has any other different origin than the public money that the Europeans or the North Americans or the Canadians or the Australians pay, so that professors devote their life to study a civilization that is so absolutely alien to their own heritage that can maintain, for example, Khajuraho in India, or the fantastic ruins in Cambodia, or the ruins of the Maya in the Inca Empire. Can we attribute to the Western world a sort of an indifference to the other world? Or is it just precisely the other way around? How much public money do you devote to the study of Western civilization in other parts of the world? Said said that we don't understand Islamic institutions, but never wrote a single line about Islamic institutions. I even doubt if he spoke Arabic. He had a full chair as professor at the University of Columbia in the state of New York.
Edward Said? Who's that?
Edward Said, Orientalism.
Wow.
Edward Said. He was one of the first who died on the AIDS epidemics. By the way, like Michel Foucault, I think it was the third or fourth in the line. When we have public money, let's say in Tehran or in Casablanca, devoted to what Said said, we will have the balance in the right side. For example, in Oxyrhynchus, they found nearly 3 tons of debris, of little pieces of writing. They're thrown there as rubbish. We have been 135 years studying that, basically in the University of Oxford, with funds from the whole world. We have obtained with that approximately 200 volumes of literature that would have been lost in another case. This work of maintaining what has died 2,000 years ago is a thing we should be proud of and that should be remembered. When we speak of a Western civilization as Eurocentric, we forget that the spirit of liberty, the spirit of justice, is being maintained by this civilization. Only by this civilization, in my opinion. I'm ready to acknowledge that I'm wrong.
Would I possibly put one question, which is, isn't the idea itself of a Western civilization problematic in the way that it excludes the way in which history is a lot more permeated than, self enclosed, like Western civilization, as if it could be defined as something in itself? I mean, doesn't it owe a lot more to the rest of the world? And isn't the rest of the world contributing a lot more to these universities? And don't we have maybe people
the rest of the world contributing a lot to the
universities?
University of Oxford? The rest of the world contributing a lot to the University of Oxford?
And also in terms of when you think of, okay, what is the rest of the world studying? Where I come from, Brazil, to us, to our children in school and throughout school, history, unfortunately, is still European history. I mean, the colonization of our minds is so big that we don't even see the rest of the world.
But how did Europe become a civilizer or colonizer instead of colonized or civilized?
Well, through history.
Yeah, and this is called action, and the other thing is called passivity,
and,
or not.
And then we come down to the issue of this debate, which is the limits to inequality, because inequality among people inside certain states and inside bigger entities as so-called civilizations and throughout the world can be maybe the underlying problem which we have to think about how to deal with.
I started talking about inside the family. I started talking that these inequalities happen inside the family. And if you don't deny that, I think that you shall accept the rest of the argument.
Okay, I mean, just to correct an information, because maybe it needs to be corrected. Edward Said, who I know as a Palestinian academic and freedom fighter, and politician, and thinker, and writer, who I personally benefited a lot of his beautiful Arabic lectures to the young people of Palestine, and I carry the tradition of Edward Said in many thoughts and ideas. When you introduced him, he sounded to me not the one who I know, you know? Edward Said was the greatest critic of the concept of Orientalism based on the Eurocentric approach to our culture and civilization, and he introduced another alternative of how to understand the Orient, you know? So in a way or another, sometimes where you stand is, you know, define your judgment. And I think, okay, I would accept that this is your right. You stood in an area which you rightly said that the Western civilization introduced to us magnificent achievements, which I don't argue against. But if you were one of us in the rest of the world, you would have also a parallel narrative to tell about the Western civilization. If you were a South African, definitely apartheid will definitely live with you for long generations to come. If you were living in the Middle East, definitely the concept of Israel and the discrimination against the Palestinians and the Balfour Declaration, which we today, Britain, celebrating 100 years of it, is also live with you for a long time to come. It will come to you that the colonization of Africa and slavery and many other stories will also be a product of the so-called Western civilization. I'm not saying the Western civilization is evil, but I am saying there is some form of approach that, in my opinion, should be multi-level approach to this, and to establish the Western civilization as a distinct only product from Western people is, in my opinion, also another systematic wrong. Why? Because I think it is a result and the culmination of achievements of humanity that reached a moment of Oxford and Harvard. And Oxford and Harvard have been built definitely on a legacy of Al-Azhar and Al-Zaytuna in Tunisia and many other great universities across the world. So it is, I won't see civilization as an ownership of some group of humans who happen right now to own a lot of the world wealth. And I would see it as a continuation of a human endeavor to achieve, progress and success in their lives.
Right, but Said was a professor in New York. I will simply ask.
Of course.
Yes, simply ask is if there is any chance.
Yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. And he suffered himself personally from a lot of discrimination when he was also in that university.
Well, he was suffering discrimination, but he was earning a good salary as an American professor. Or am I wrong?
Okay, so here, Eduardo Suplicy, the second question there, and one more. Okay, we have the three here. Quick questions, please. Where's the mic?
Yeah, not lectures.
Okay, my name is Eduardo. I wanted to take back to the original topic of the limits of inequality. And Mr. Antonio said that, well, of course, it's inevitable that we are different from each other. We are humans, after all. We are not ants or a coral reef either. And he explained how even inside families there are very different outcomes despite having the same opportunities. And I said, yes, inequality is unavoidable. But as you may know, since we are very social animals, after all, the reaction against inequality, it's also unavoidable. I mean, as you might be aware, there are many experiments with chimpanzees and how they react when they are treated differently. They act violently. They are animals, but we humans, we might not be so violent, but we do feel that type of discomfort. So while we all agree that total equality is not something that we seek, because I'm okay with having my own face, but at some point it's unavoidable to feel discomforted by it. And my question is, where do we put that limit between the natural inequality that accompanies us humans, and if we could ever allow, and to which degree we can allow inequality to prosper?
Okay, and going with the same topic, my question will be, keeping in mind that the technology, as you said before, is just advancing, and the artificial intelligence is going to make, as a consequence, a loss of a lot of labor and jobs for the humans, how this will translate in equality in terms of social and economic equality, compare us with another beings like animals or artificial beings.
Okay, we have two questions down here. Here at the front row, please. Okay.
I've been interested in this discussion about civilization and tribal societies, because I think that what we've seen in the world recently is the extent to which people behave in tribal ways. It's just that they don't call it that, and I'm grateful to Wada for drawing attention to that fact. But my question actually relates to the issue of the fear of artificial intelligence. Although you spent a lot of time in the past, and I just don't want to go there because there's so many misconceptions that it's just not possible to deal with them. But if we look to the future, you talked about artificial intelligence and its potential. I find myself, almost every vision of the future that we have seen, whether it's in films or in books, more so in films, is always some form of dystopia. So that even if we want to level things out in families, and then the next generation is not to have the advantages that the first generation built up. So you have some kind of brave new world, or totalitarian taking away of children from their parents. There's always some element of something horrible going on, either disrupting natural human feelings, or you have to allow a continued piling up of inequalities. And I wonder where the balance lies between those, whether either of the speakers has an idea, whether there's a happy mean, because as I said, almost every vision of the future is one of a dystopian future. And I find myself asking, is that because just like God is supposed to have made man in his own image, we also make the idea of robots, if I can use that word, in our own image, and therefore we put into them this idea that somehow somebody's got to be top dog, somebody has to suppress in order for the whole Terminator thing, that the machines can't just go off and live as machines. What do they need humans for? What's their business with humans? But instead they have to exterminate the humans, and in fact even travel through time to kill them. I wonder whether we're projecting a kind of view of humanity onto, and whether if that's the dominance that we have at the moment, whether we should in fact be worried about it, or whether there are other aspects of humanity that we can identify and instill into this artificial, perhaps an emotional intelligence along with the artificial intelligence.
And the last question here, please.
Short. What are the main instruments of economic policy that may increase the level of justice and therefore diminish inequality?
Thank you.
Good question.
Please.
So,
I think we have
anyway.
our final
Quick
interventions
answers.
now.
Just I would take the angle of biotechnology and information, artificial intelligence, just to say we don't know. Really, I agree with you. I agree with your analysis. We normally are scared of the future because we don't want to abandon our comfort zone that we have adapted to. Now, there are trends, as I said. I would count these 3 trends as the major trends that might have a social and political and economic implications on us. The first one is networking, and I do believe it is positive. I think this is something that will carry a lot of value to us, and in the case of equality and justice, that might become a major issue. Then we have the artificial intelligence. There is a very beautiful side for it, because definitely with artificial intelligence, we will have access to collective mind, which has not yet born. I mean, the concept that I'm going to have a cloud, I am tapped to in it, and then analytically, I'm getting from it a huge amount of knowledge. This is definitely a great achievement of the human mind. In the next 20 years, most likely, we expect that we might really reach a moment of the singularity where we are, the machine is capable of producing to us a huge amount of knowledge through processing this collective data that we are accumulating. This is very beautiful and it's going to change a lot of what we do. But it has also a negative side, which is to what extent we can allow artificial intelligence to replace our own judgment. Because so far, none of us has been able to judge whether these robots that you are referring to or the artificial intelligence per se is going to have the emotional intelligence as well necessary to define certain kind of concept. Some people think that it is positive because it will be much more objective rather than the subjectivity of the human biases. Some people would say we might even lose control because machines could start defining the new rules and morality for us, and they might even force us to follow it and discriminate against us. This is another object of discussion internationally. The third one is about biotechnology, the third trend. There is definitely a very positive side of it. Now we can eliminate the concept of inheritant diseases like diabetics and many others through redesigning the genome of the human being and cutting the chromosomes that are bad, replacing them with good ones, and therefore we might come up with much more healthy and powerful human being. This is positive and this is good, but also the negative side is immense. Given the fact that the laboratories of today are busy developing techniques that not all of them are so charitable and fantastic, especially the military laboratories, I would argue that we might face in the future huge ethical and moral dilemmas of to what extent the definition of a human being versus the others is going to be evolving through biotechnology. So again, what I'm saying, we had a chance, by the way, you remember the concept of cloning a few years ago, when the humanity stood in a very, in my opinion, very positive moment. All of us stood to define the ethics and morality of what cloning should be. That was, in my opinion, a successful attempt of the humanity to achieve something positive. And we did achieve positive side in it. Are we going to lose our authority collectively over these trends and is going to be hijacked by self-interest corporations or even gangs or even parallel organizations to develop it and use it? We don't know. But for now, what I'm calling for is an international or a universal stance of people in order to define the ethical and moral foundations of these kind of innovations before it goes beyond control and monitor everything that happens. The society should start monitoring that in order to make sure that it doesn't go into the wrong hands or wrong dimension.
Thank you. Please.
Well, I think I was not clear enough before in the sense that now eugenics is a condemned word. We don't even mention it. But Dalton was a cousin of Darwin, and his chair of eugenics was considered the most scientific in his time. The idea that man can treat himself as a person who grows cattle or who grows plants and intends to make them better, the plants or the animals. The idea that man can act upon himself, making him better through any means, is taking mankind as a means instead of an end in itself. It's a monstrosity. It's the deepest formulation we can obtain of a monstrosity. Dr. Frankenstein. So any development of intellectual, artificial intelligence or of technique, of manipulation of molecular matters that affects man, unless it is completely voluntary and transparent, in my opinion, is a crime against mankind, should be persecuted as such. We have had all the 20th century as an experience for the crazy idea of Dalton, based on his cousin, that mankind can get better through eugenics. Later on, Stalin, Lenin, Hitler, Pol Pot, all type of guys, have tried to make mankind better. This is monstrosity. This is abomination, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, so with those two final conclusions, we can finish the session, I think so? No more questions, and do we have time for one more question? Okay.
Hi. Okay, my question has to do with an expectation I had at this debate. For me, inequality meant that we were going to talk about specifically economic inequality, about, I'm a bit surprised we didn't talk about neoliberal economies, about poverty, and I have the feeling that the discussion was hijacked by reproducing a dichotomic view of the world as West versus non-West. We didn't mention, but there's Islamophobia that is the elephant in the room also. So I wonder why you think this happened. Why do you think that this was what you presented to us as inequality in the world today? Thank you.
The origins of inequality. You're asking about the origins of inequality. I should say that the origin of inequality is the difference between a person who decides to work, for example, to build a well to recover the water that comes in the winter but doesn't come in the summer, and the other person who decides to pray to the God of rain, saying that, oh, I want some water.
To answer the question, actually, just to make a final contribution, I think there was a question as well about what is the mechanism that could be used to achieve. I am, really developing a very positive idea about this concept of basic income, the minimum income for humans in order to survive and to later on flourish and to use the rest of their neurons. But I think a lot of people can't have access to their neurons because they are busy trying to struggle and strive. So one of the techniques, one of the major themes that maybe we need to explore seriously and to really put it under, good analysis is the issue of basic income. And I do support it at this stage, at least, until proven otherwise, because I couldn't find any other. If we would leave this concept of inequality to its logical end, definitely we will continue maximizing the gap between the rich and the poor. And this definitely is not going to create neither prosperity nor peace amongst societies internationally. So yes, I would use that technique as a stepping stone towards a much more just and equal economic structure.
Well, this is very interesting because there are Swiss people, which is, in my opinion, the only country that can pay for it. Because one thing is that we want basic rent. Another thing is that we have a budget capable of really answering the question. I think that the Swiss have answered 74% against, all on their own, and of course, I'm not against or pro, I don't know. Sincerely, I haven't been thinking on the matter.
So I would invite you to the second session tomorrow, in which
yeah.
this topic will be discussed.
That's it. But we have to take into account that the only country that is really prosperous enough to address this matter has decided that this would stimulate the opposite to diligence. And diligence is the difference between building a well or praying to the God of the rain. I think mankind has not yet obtained a level of technical development.
Actually, I would say that my father, I remember when I was young, and I think he didn't change that habit. He was a farmer, and he was definitely doing his best to, fix the land, put the seeds, put the fertilizers, and after he finishes everything, he used also to pray to God that rain should come. I don't think a contradiction could happen between both of them, and at least my father always succeeded in doing that.
It is a contradiction, my friend, because the countries of Africa, they don't build wells.
Okay.
I insist there is a contradiction, and that's the difference in rent per capita of Africa and Europe.